So, with the conclusion of the Fontaine Archon quest comes a new wave of hype reveals. Amongst them are the reveals for the Gnosis, and, well, I managed to get a few good ideas from this information that I'll speculate upon in this video. The reveals of the Gnosis have thrown a curveball of sorts in some people's theories, so it's good to go over everything we know and apply this new information to past events. I also have some theories of my own that I'll be sharing later in the video. So, first let us return to the basics and establish the facts. What is a Gnosis? A question that has honestly eluded us for years due to how tight-lipped the characters are about it. They appear to be divine artifacts of the heavenly principles that were granted to winners of the Archon War. They carry great elemental power and the ability to resonate with Celestia. There's 7 of them total, each corresponding to one of the 7 elements in Teyvat. According to Nahida, the Gnosis are symbols of control from the heavenly principles over Teyvat. She also mentions that the heavenly principles have been silent for a long time, and that raises the question whether they'd awaken if one was destroyed. This is an important point I will touch upon later. The Gnosis do have a great deal of power. The Gnosis powered Teyvat's only mint that produces the world's Mora, and the Gnosis was the main power source of the Akasha system. Then there's Scaramouche. Allegedly, his use of the Gnosis as the everlasting Lord of Arcane Wisdom elevated his power on par with the real god. It's also established that the Tsaritsa seeks to collect all 7 Gnosis. She plans to eventually rebel against the heavenly principles, and, as far as we know, the collection of all the Gnosis seems to be a key part of that plan. During Fontaine, we've learned a great deal of new information on the Gnosis. The first is the Skirk revelation in Act 5. They are the remains of the third Descender, and that they are allegedly objects of misfortune that Neuvillette best get rid of. The second concerns the historical significance of the Gnosis revealed in Neuvillette's vision story. Severely wounded in the Great War of Vengeance, the usurper had their functions ruined and could no longer use their absolute authority to suppress the original order of the world. To continue to subdue and control the resentments and loathing of the world, the usurper and the one who came after created the Gnosis together. So it came to be that an order was made to be upheld, and thus did humans come to only possess these 7 remembrances, and all fragments of the primordial were driven to devour each other. This is a massive revelation. Since the heavenly principles came to Teyvat before the third Descender, they were around before the creation of the Gnosis, and it turns out the Gnosis were a reinforcement of existing systems of power. The usurper and the one who came after created the Gnosis together, but they also allegedly fought against each other at some point. I'll set aside this detail for now, as it raises a whole new discussion about the relationship between the primordial one and the one who came after. And lastly, there's one more reveal that cleared up some misconceptions developing prior to patch 4.2. The Gnosis themselves do not contain the Stolen Sovereign's powers. I saw a lot of people confused when the seat of the Hydro Archon was abolished, with Neuvillette regaining full elemental authority, seemingly having no effect on the Gnosis. The Gnosis, as it turns out, functions independently from sovereign power. Neuvillette acknowledges the power of the Hydro Gnosis, but deems it unnecessary now that he's regained full elemental authority. This detail makes sense when combined with the earlier account regarding the origins of the Gnosis. The existing functions of control were ruined, and the Gnosis were made to restore the usurper's order. This could, in theory, explain the relationship of power between Neuvillette and Focalors. It appears that the seats of the 7 Archons are independent institutions from the Gnosis, as the destruction of the Hydro seat doesn't have any effect on the Hydro Gnosis. Or at the very least, that's what the story is implying. Just by looking at how much power Scaramouche gained from the usage of the Gnosis, perhaps the raw power is in itself an incredibly important thing. Neuvillette demonstrated to us the strength of an elemental sovereign, even in a partially dormant state as seen against Child. Just that fact alone shows that the sovereigns would pose a threat to the Archons and their seats, so it stands to reason that the Gnosis would shift the power overwhelmingly in the Archons' favor. In conclusion, the Gnoses are their own source of power, likely the preserved power of the Third Descender. They are not seats of the Archons themselves, they seem to be their own separate thing introduced after the creation of the 7 Archon seats. This is important to note because now the Tsaritsa's goals do not conflict with the Sovereign's goals. The Gnoses, as it stands, are not a direct barrier to the restoration of the elemental dragons. Now with that out of the way, let's dive into some of the juicy theories. Theory number 1. The Heavenly Principles are severely weakened at present. In the Genshin story fanbase, much has been said about why the Heavenly Principles are seemingly doing nothing in the face of all these events. The Fatui are successfully gathering all the Gnoses and growing in strength. The Abyss has always been a problem dating back to the Cataclysm. They have the Abyss Twin on their side, and now the Hydro Archon has committed treason by destroying the Hydro Seat. I guess now it's just the 6 Archons? What is Celestia doing right now? Are they not inclined to take action in response to these threats, just like how they did with Orobashi in the past? Neuvillette's vision story, I think, gave us a very important hint. Maybe they don't have the power to take action anymore. Originally, from what we knew of the battle with Nibelung, the Dragon King sought to use the power of forbidden knowledge to win an otherwise losing war against the Primordial One. At some point after his defeat, the Primordial One cast down the Divine Nails in an attempt to heal the land, although the nails caused great destruction to the surrounding earth. Now, it's revealed that one of these wars was so bad that it managed to destroy the functions of the Primordial One's authority, and the Gnoses were required to restore that authority. This evidence seems to imply that forbidden knowledge played a major role in undermining the rule of the heavens. Which incident also had a world-altering outbreak of forbidden knowledge? The Cataclysm. And King Deshret's outbreak, but more importantly, the Cataclysm. The Cataclysm was undoubtedly a global disaster that changed the world and ravaged all of Teyvat. Most notably, it has a confirmed death toll of 3 Archons, Makoto, Rukkhadevata, and Egeria. I can't imagine such an event not crippling the institutions of Celestia to some similar degree, so there you go. I wouldn't be surprised if even the original Pyro and Cryo Archon was also revealed dead 500 years ago, because it seems to be the one incident at the center of the entire story. Prediction number 2. The true reason why the Sustainer stopped the twins from leaving Teyvat. A while back, I saw a few funny theory videos about how the Sustainer was incredibly idiotic for not letting the twins leave. Amusing as they were, the main argument was that the twins were already leaving Teyvat, so you're just creating extra problems for yourself now that they're stuck here as your unnecessary enemies. But now with the revelation of the Third Descender, it may be more rational than we thought. It's said the Traveler's body has similar properties to the Third Descender and the Gnoses. If Celestia is indeed weak from the Khaenri'ah disaster, and the obvious fact that their authority today is clearly waning with the destruction of the Hydro Archon's seat and the Fatui seizing nearly all the Gnoses, that the Fourth Descender might be their way of renewing control by using the Traveler's powers similarly to the Third Descender. There's no doubt that Celestia had some plans for the twins at the time. There must be some deeper motive for capturing them and releasing them in Teyvat. It's difficult to believe all this a mere coincidence. Now, it could be just as simple as using the Traveler's body to make a Gnosis 2.0, but I'm not going to make any wild guesses here. The one thing I am confident about is that the Heavenly Principles do likely plan on using the Fourth Descender for something, but to what end I'll choose to wait and see. Prediction number 3. The role of the Forbidden Knowledge and the Gnosis in decline. Now, supposing that forbidden knowledge is indeed one of the main culprits behind all these disasters, And supposing that every notable enemy of the heavens tried to weaponize forbidden knowledge against them, a Nibelung, King Deshret, Apep, and Conria, the Fatui may be following the same path, or at least that's what it looked like at the time. One could easily forget the original goal of the Gnosis experiment in Sumeru. The plan was to collect a vast amount of forbidden knowledge and inject it into Scaramouche. Obviously, the sages were delusional in believing it to be the nation's great hope, but Dottore must already know what it really is. But of course, that's not the whole story. If Dottore was really intent on experimenting on the forbidden knowledge, then why didn't he interfere?
It was my experiment, so why should I interfere with the results?
Dottore said he wouldn't help Scaramouche because it was already an experiment he was willing to observe. If his main goal was to ensure the forbidden knowledge be experimented upon, then he would have then taken action to make sure that happened before stepping away from the scene. But even so, he observed an experiment with conditions he was willing to accept, which was just Scaramouche with the Gnosis fighting the Traveler, and then he expressed disappointment with the outcome. Nahida questioned what if the experiment succeeded and there would be a new god, which at least confirms that you could create a god with the power of a Gnosis, yet the result still ended in disappointment. Seriously, one wonders what Dottore hoped would happen. Was he trying to test whether the Gnosis were capable of harnessing forbidden knowledge? Is that still a priority, or is that simply a side mission not essential to the Tsaritsa's plan? Maybe his experiment was to test the Gnosis' power themselves, and that it didn't meet his expectations. It's clear at this point that the 7 Gnosis, formerly created to restore the Heavenly Order, is insufficient in light of all these recent events. The Hydro seat is gone, the Hydro Sovereign has returned to full power, but even before that, the Fatui have always been seizing Gnosis, and even creating their own gods with their experiment. One has to wonder if any other experiment is happening with other Gnosis that we're not aware of. It's unclear how much of this can be attributed to the Gnosis themselves losing their value, or how much is the heavenly principles simply being crippled by the Conria disaster. Skirk and Nahida both made passing comments about how the Gnosis were objects of calamity and disaster. For Nahida at the time, it was a masterless foreign Gnosis the Dendro Archon couldn't use, so it made sense. But in theory, Neuvillette could use the Hydro Gnosis. He never stated he couldn't, he merely said he didn't need it. Aside from Celestia being unable to act, it's possible that the Gnosis themselves are outliving their usefulness to the heavenly principles. Whatever their plans are, it makes the loss of the Gnosis somewhat acceptable in their eyes. They're not fighting tooth and nail for them, which means they must have a better plan in place. If it's true that the heavenly principles are pivoting towards the Traveler and looking to appropriate their power, then it explains the timing of all these events. The Fatui likely sense Celestia are no longer in a position to respond, and so they're choosing to grab all the Gnosis now. On the subject of forbidden knowledge, I don't think the Fatui will go down the route of Nibelung and Conria and try to weaponize the forbidden knowledge they did against the heavens. They were experimenting with it as seen in Sumeru, so there could be something there, but it was low priority seeing as how Dottore didn't mind that the knowledge capsules never made it to Scaramouche. To summarize everything here, something may be wrong with the Gnosis themselves. Celestia seem to be content to allow them to fall into enemy hands, and the Tsaritsa is seizing this opportunity to salvage its power. It's one possible explanation that explains why the heavens aren't responding to the Fatui seizing the Gnosis. Either that, or whatever they believe will replace the Gnosis, is even better. Alright, this is Editor Azu here, trying to address some extra information I discovered mid-production. I'm taking the time to get it in here and delay the upload a few days so none of you miss out. So first, in regards to Dottore's interest in forbidden knowledge, there was also the fact that the other Dottore, we'll call him Bottore, tried to push hard to take Hypatia and even sent Fatui assassins after her to prevent her from falling under the wrong hands. This was a curious case still with no explanation to this day. Now, the thing about forbidden knowledge is that it's deeply embedded into the Irminsul and Greater Lord Rukkhadevata along with it, starting from the Conria disaster. I mean, technically it started with the fall of King Deshret, but the Conria disaster is when things started getting really bad. As far as we know, Hypatia was the first and probably the only scholar who managed to connect with the Irminsul and reach the Balladier's consciousness. She also did go partially insane and exhibited similar symptoms with the other scholars who were exposed to forbidden knowledge. The thing with Dottore, if he really wanted to take Hypatia, he could have just went there himself and nobody, especially not an injured Tignari, would stop him. The Gnosis has always been the Fatui's biggest priority, but this, although important, was eventually dropped. The erasure of Rukkhadevata might have affected this mission somewhat, but I think there's more to this story. Let's also not forget the burning Irminsul in the Fatui trailer. Dottore first watches Irminsul burn in Kale's dream, then he takes an interest in Hypatia, who was connected to Scaramouche within the Irminsul, which is a rare feat. Then he tells Nahida the secrets hidden by Irminsul in exchange for the Dendrognosis. While this information technically doesn't give me clear answers, it does lead me to believe that there is something here. There's also the fact that Dottore performed research on Elazar and managed to suspend the advance of the disease in Kale by injecting her with god remains or Archon residue. Oh geez, this is giving me sharp parallels to the Divine Nails and the Great War of Vengeance. Maybe I could make a follow-up video on Dottore's research with this new information sometime. The second thing I need to bring up is Yai Miko's conversation with the Traveler about the Electro-Gnosis. A discarded the Gnosis 500 years ago and severed her ties with Celestia, and Yai Miko considers it a source of conflict, which is similar to what Nahida said about it. Now, there's a lot of emphasis on how the Gnosis are bringers of misfortune, conflict, or disaster, and that Tsaritsa is going to gather them all in one place. One can't help but imagine just how dangerous that would be. In that sense, it's probably better to collect them all within a short period of time to minimize misfortune. Also, we assume that Tsaritsa needs all 7 Gnosis as part of her plan. I'm imagining a scenario where the Traveler wins the Pyro-Gnosis in a 1v1 duel with the Pyro Archon or with Capitano, and then we would have all the leverage heading into Snezhnaya. It's way too early to try to predict the circumstances of the Traveler entering Snezhnaya, but if they end up taking the Pyro-Gnosis for themselves, I imagine it's the easiest way for them to hold significant leverage against the Tsaritsa so he can demand an audience with her. I can't imagine reaching her would be easy, so that's one way to go about it. So, that's my take on the situation with the Gnosis. What do you guys think? I will admit I'm not the most knowledgeable lore theorist out there. Far from it, so tell me if there's anything you'd like to share. So anyways, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.